Okay, so disaster has stricken. Your double knitting is off the needles, you've tried pulling something back but you've got a very grippy yarn and you've managed to pull a right royal mess, and there's just no way you can get that back onto the needles. So what do you do? The best thing to do in this situation is to insert a lifeline. It doesn't matter if you haven't done it as you went along, you can do it after the event and it will save you a lot of bother in a place like this. The first thing to do is to thread a piece of waste yarn onto a tapestry needle, and I've already done that here. And this is, ideally it's going to be a yarn that's thinner than the one you're using and one that you can see nicely against the colours of the yarns that you've used in the double knitting itself. You then need to identify a row of your knitting which is below anywhere that's got any problems. So this row is bad because there's a stitch here that's lower down that's missing. This row would be bad because this one on the end is causing a problem lower down. So I'm going to use the row below that last problem, which is here. And you can see that it does mean that I'm going to have to be coming back down quite some way in this double knitting, but that's better than losing it completely. So the main difference between inserting a lifeline in double knitting and in single face knitting is that it needs to be done on both sides. There's no point trying to work the same piece of yarn through both sides of the knitting. You'd never get things to line up. So the best thing to do is to put in two separate lifelines, and you need to make sure, of course, that they're going to be on the same row. We can come to that in a moment. The other thing with putting in a lifeline is, just like in single face knitting, you need to make sure that you catch every single stitch once only, and that it's a good idea to make sure that your stitches are mounted correctly on the lifeline. It makes things a little bit easier when you're putting them back on the needles later on. So how do you do that? Well, working with your tapestry needle from the right hand side of the work towards the left hand side, all you need to do is you pick up the right leg of every V. Can you see on camera there that every stitch is a little V? There's the one from the slip stitch edging. Here's a V from the actual knitting itself. There's a blue V and a grey V. Well, each V has a left hand side and a right hand side. So we want to insert the tapestry needle underneath the right hand side of every V. That's going to be easy when I get to a blue one. But I'm just going to go under this grey one. I'm going to miss the left hand leg of the V, and I'm going to go underneath the right hand leg of the blue stitch, then the grey stitch, then the blue stitch. It's important to make sure that you don't skip from one row to the next. What you should end up with as you work all the way along is one line of little diagonal lines all facing towards the right as they work from bottom to top along the needle that way. And then I can go into the grey one. This swatch is mercifully very, very small. I did that very deliberately. Under the grey, under the blue, and finally under the grey. Then I can pull my tapestry needle all the way through, and I have a lifeline inserted into one side. You can just see it poking through there. Not the best of colours, but it's all I had to hand. So I'm going to turn. You can cut both sides of this here, leaving enough slack so it's not going to pull its way through. I'm not going to bother to cut it this time. I'm just going to work my way round to the other side. Now here's where you need to really match things up. So you can see that I've used this stitch here, if I can get things to focus. You can see my last stitch on this side is this one. Well, that marries up. If I can get this waste yarn out of the way, so you can see that stitch tallies up with this stitch. So that's the one I'm going to go into on this side. And then it's just a case, again, of working the needle underneath the right leg of every V as you go across the other side. With a bit of luck, this will work out very nicely and I will be on the same row on both sides. It's not the end of the world if you realise that you're one row up or one row down from the first side. It just means there's a little bit of jiggery pokery to do at the end, so it's a lot easier if you can get it right first time. Although, as I say, not the end of the world. So there we go, that's through all the stitches that I need to worry about. And there's the needle coming through. So, what do you do next? Well, I've got my lifelines on both sides. The next thing to do is to just pull on the working yarns of your actual project and just keep unraveling and ripping out, frogging if you will, all the way until you get to that lifeline. When you reach the lifeline, you just won't be able to pull it out any further. And there you can see I've got one very tidy piece of ripping out. All the stitches of the rows I'm looking for are held very, very nicely in place by the lifelines on both sides. That seems to have worked out very well. I don't think I've got any problems with the rows not matching up, so that's good news. The next stage is you need to pick up the stitches onto another set of needles. Now, it's a good idea to use needles that are smaller than your actual working needles, just because if you're trying to put a big fat needle through these stitches, every time you push it through, the girth of the needle is going to pull the next stitch a little bit tighter and a little bit tighter, and it's going to get harder and harder as you work along. So I was using a size 4mm needles for this project. This is a 2.5. That's easily going to give us plenty of room. All you have to do is you work your smaller needle into all of the stitches that are held on the lifeline on one side. You know, you can do it alternating backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards. It's just a little trickier, so it's probably easier at this stage to work in a separate part of the process, one more step if you will. I mean, who knows? You've been very frustrated with this project. It's caused you a lot of stress. Why not take the easy way out? So here we go. 1, 2, 3. Just slipping them on, following the line of the lifeline through the stitches, one at a time, until you get them back on the needle. There, that's very, very nice there. And then with the other needle, you just do exactly the same. Now, it's a good idea to work in the same direction as you have just done. So I'm going to get the working yarns out of the way here. Now, one of these has pulled, there you go. Can you see how that stitch just pulled itself back out? I gave a little tug on the lifeline, and the stitch, which had tugged itself underneath, it's still held on the lifeline there, but it just tucked itself out of the way. Pulling on the lifeline is what pulls it back into view. So I can get through there, through that one as well, then that one, and then I'm good to go. Nice and quickly. See how easy this is? All the way to the other side. Now, I've got my stitches very nicely, I'm just going to get out of the way of the camera there, very nicely lined up onto 2 parallel needles. And can you see they're already wanting to align themselves in their own gaps. This is where I bring up my original working needle, and I'm just going to slide these, slip them one at a time, purlwise, always purlwise, from the front needle, from the back, from the front needle, from the back. Can you see I've left the lifeline in place? I haven't taken it out yet. This is just in case any of these stages go wrong. I can always go back to the lifeline. Here we go. I'm going to slip from the front, the back, front, from the back. Always make sure you start off from the front before going to the back needle. That means that your stitches will be in the correct order when you want to come to knitting them for the next row. Here we are, coming towards the end, last 2 stitches from the front and from the back. Now, miraculously, we have our stitches on one needle, exactly as we want them. Turning the work round, you can see that I've got my first stitch ready to work is indeed one from the front. That's exactly what we want it to look like. The only thing to do now is to pull out that lifeline. It's very simple, just a quick tug will do it. There we are, that's from the front and then from the back. So I did mine, as you can see, without doing 2 separate lifelines. I just went in from one side and then the other, and there it is gone. The only thing I've done wrong here is this first stitch is oriented incorrectly, so I can twist that back round, and all of the other stitches are nicely aligned on the needle, and the work is saved and you're ready to continue. Happy knitting. There you are, lifelines in double knitting.